Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan
you gotta be confident about your Achilles when you show up.
Yeah, I mean, I got it.
And Adam LaRue. Don't hope to be great and dominate.
All right. Welcome into another edition of Operation Domination. As always, I'm your host, Dan Mader. It's just me today. Just me. I haven't done a solo pod in forever. Now, we are going to still hear from Chaz, because while he was traveling, if you guys have been listening the last couple of weeks, he was getting ready to travel to Massachusetts, hit some sports books over there. He did do us the courtesy of dropping us a video with all of his favorite plays from each game. So we'll still hear from Chaz Valardi today. Of course, I'll talk about the game lines that I like, the player props I have in store for you today. Make sure you check out my article that's going to be coming out once again on The Huddle. Drops every Saturday with my 15 favorite player props on the weekend slate, Sunday and Monday. Obviously, not counting Thursday night games since, well, it drops on Thursday. Make sure you download Operation Domination on your favorite podcast app. Check out our video content on the Fantasy Football Advice Network YouTube channel at FF Advice Net. Now, we got a lot to go over here. And unlike last week, where we had a winning week, but it wasn't as successful as week 2. And we try to get back on track. We want wide margins, right? That's what we're all about here when we're trying to line our pockets green. I think we can do that this week. There's more value from the lines to what Chaz is going to have for us to the player props this week. And more things kind of match up nicely. And we're going to get through all of it. So let's kick it off. Now, remember, this, primarily, except for this episode being a fantasy football type podcast, there's a game on Monday or a Sunday morning at 9:30 on the East Coast, 6:30 on Pacific. 1 o'clock in the morning if you're in Hawaii, or it might be midnight, actually. It's a 6-hour difference. So make sure, if you have your fantasy football lineups in uncertainty, make sure you lock them up Saturday night. Don't be the guy who wakes up Sunday morning like, oh, I forgot there was a game. And you wind up having somebody like, I don't know, maybe Jordan Mason on the bench, and you're screwed. We don't want that here, because it is the Vikings taking on the Steelers, this game in Dublin for this week. Now, as far as the game lines go, the Vikings are favored at 2.5 points. That should come as no surprise. The Steelers have been very uneven, which also shouldn't be a surprise given that they were rolling with Aaron Rodgers and a team that was going to be highly dependent on Aaron Rodgers and Arthur Smith meshing. And while they've won a couple of games, it hasn't meshed very well recently. The offense still has a lot of woes. The number 1 paid defense in the league hasn't stopped a nosebleed. And that's why the Vikings, with Carson Wentz, are favored in this game at 2.5 points. The over-under total, 40.5. We're not expecting a lot of fireworks in this game. And I would even lean towards betting the under on that. The only reason I would even be skeptical about betting the under would be that I do think Carson Wentz's play right now is an improvement over what we've seen in JJ McCarthy those first couple of games. But the offense is still going to be centered around Jordan Mason and making sure they hide Wentz and don't overexpose them. But since the Steelers defense doesn't stop anybody, that's the only risk I see to an under in this ball game. And I do like the Vikings to win at -2.5. Brian Flores has that defense playing well. And I'm not just talking about last week when they went psycho through the roof. All right, that's obviously not going to happen every single week. Aaron Rodgers is not going to turn over the ball quite to that level, the way Jake Browning did. But I do think the Vikings are the better team right now, are more in sync right now. Now, some betting notes for you. The Steelers, this should go to both of the point. Last 7 games are 2-5 against the spread. They haven't been able to win anyway. So give me the Vikings -2.5 in this game. I do have a player prop for you, but first I want to hear from Chaz Valardi with his bets for this one.
So, play broke down. We're sitting in Midway. What are you going to do? You know, it's so funny because I got some notes here that these early W's and L's that your team gets, they're not relative because you don't know what you're dealing with in terms of who you're playing and who's good and who isn't good. But this Minnesota-Pittsburgh game, I'm a big Ones fan. I like them. But Cincinnati, that win may not mean anything. Pittsburgh, 7 TD passes in 3 games for the old guys. I think it leads the league. New Orleans against the spread on the.
Okay, we'll get the New Orleans in a second there. So Chaz right there kind of telling you, hey, I'm not sure about this game either. It could go either way. That's most of the NFL. But I will lean on the Vikings in this matchup because I don't like what I've seen out of the Steelers. You already have Aaron Rodgers complaining about when they got to Ireland, as if somehow that's going to affect anything about what is a less than mediocre play at this point in his career with a less than mediocre offensive coordinator in Arthur Smith. I mean, riddle me this. You guys who have DK Metcalf, you know this. Why is suddenly the most physical phenom, deep threat wide receiver in the league running patterns like he's Cooper Kupp? Like, that's what's happening right now. And that's what we have to deal with. Plus a defense that can't stop anybody. So give me that. My player prop for this game that I'm going to be locking in. And I'll talk more about this in my article tomorrow in the huddle. Jordan Mason over on his rushing yards. Right now, it's 81.5, the over-under line. I got him projected for 97.5 going into this game. It's one of my biggest edges of the week. Now, Mason, who has only started and been the bell cow for 1 game, is averaging 71 yards per game on 13 carries so far this season. And we know that that is skewed by the fact that Aaron Jones was in the ball game the first 2 weeks. Now Jones is out. Mason was a bell cow, over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns just a week ago. With a 21 implied point total out of Minnesota, it favors a neutral game script, which right now the Vikings are very much a run-first team, and the Steelers have been getting gashed in the run game. So give me Jordan Mason over the 81.5 rushing yards mark. Now we get into Sunday, and one of the biggest over-unders of the week. First of all, before we even get into this game, I feel really bad for Saints fans. Like, whenever you're a fan of a team that you know has no hope going into the season, before anything kicks off, it's a demoralizing situation because you're going to watch the games because you're a fan of the NFL, you're a fan of your team. And you just know you're in for a rough Sunday. And right now, the Bills are favored at 15.5. Be double digit, not just double digit, but 3-score underdogs in an NFL game. Woof. To have to deal with Spencer Rattler. Woof. To waste a second-round pick on a 26-year-old quarterback who couldn't even beat out Spencer Rattler and Tyler Shuck. Woof. I mean, it's got to be rough to be a Saints fan right now. And it's not going to get any better going up against one of the best teams in the AFC with the Buffalo Bills. So if you're asking me, hey, Dan, this is the NFL. When you get these big spreads, are you actually going to bet against it, being that anything can happen on any given Sunday? The answer is yes. We saw this a couple of weeks ago when the Browns were double-digit underdogs against the Ravens, and the Ravens blew them out 40-10. Now you can say, well, wait a minute. They came back against Green Bay. But guess what? The Browns weren't even double-digit underdogs against Green Bay. Green Bay was favored in that game by -8.5. So even the books thought those two teams were closer together in talent. I see nothing wrong with this line. The total is sitting at 47.5. What's crazy about the total is that strictly comes down to Buffalo being able to put up 30-plus points in this game, which they absolutely could. The one thing I'll say about Buffalo, and maybe this plays against the line too, they have a tendency to want to play with their food. So when they have a team like the Saints who are well below them, they don't always look to just blow them out. But in this case, the talent alone may just do that for them, just naturally. They may be up 25 to 30 points heading into the second half of this game. That's a real scenario in this one. Now, I will say this, Josh Allen, He hasn't been great against the spread when he's a double-digit favorite. He's 6-10-2. Again, that goes back to my point of sometimes the Bills like to play with their food. But the Saints haven't covered anything. They covered against the 49ers. That's it. That's all they did so far. It's been brutal. Absolutely brutal having to watch this team just devoid of talent. Now, before I get to my player props in this one, because at least that's the beauty of betting, we can still line our pockets even in a lopsided affair like this. I do want to hear from Chaz Valardi to see what he has on this game.
1-6. They just can't score. Buffalo's back-to-back home games. This is their third home game already this year. I like their team total over 31.5. Cleveland has scored 0.
Okay, so right there, Chaz is telling you, take Buffalo in the over. I don't know if I would take the game over because I don't even know if the Saints can put up, let's say they get 31.5 like they're implied to do. I don't even know if the Saints get 16. I really don't. They have a hard time moving the ball, and the Bills' defense is actually playing quite well outside of the Baltimore game. So, yeah, Bills over? Sure. Over on the game? Staying away from that line. So I do like the bet there from Chaz. Let's talk about my player props. Speaking of Spencer Rattler and sucking, the line on him is 205.5 passing yards. Now, you might say to yourself, well, Dan, he's averaging 213 because they're throwing the ball 50 times a game because they know just coming out of the gate, just based on kickoff, even when the score is 0-0, as soon as the kickoff happens, they're in a negative game script. Kellen Moore's already trying to play catch-up ball because it's the only shot he has to keep the game somewhat competitive. I will give him this credit, though. The Saints have played hard. You can see the effort. You can see the heart out there. And that should be a shout-out to all those players because as a player, going into a Sunday, well, you know you're already doomed, to still go out there and give your best effort, there is something to be applauded for that. It says something about the coach. It says something about those players. Doesn't change the fact that you're doomed from the start. And doesn't change the fact that despite Spencer Rattler throwing the ball a near 50 times a game, that I still have the under his 205.5 passing yards mark because I only have him projected at 195.7 heading into this week. So that gives him a 59.7% cover probability heading into this game based on my projections. Remember, the Saints are only implied for 18 points. Woof. The Buffalo Bills have only allowed 438 passing yards so far this season through 3 games, and they haven't all been cupcakes. So with the Bills defense playing well, with the Saints having no explosion in their game because Spencer Rattler's averaging only a 5.73 yards per attempt, I'm taking the under on Spencer Rattler's prop. And coincidentally, if you want a fantasy implication on this real quick, look outside of full point PPR leagues because Chris Olave could get 8 to 10 catches, even though it goes for 50 yards. He's still a decent fantasy play in full point PPR. Half point standard, maybe go with a better option if you have the ability to do so. So now we talk about the Chargers and the Giants. And in this matchup, we get the interesting narrative of Jackson Dart being able to make his first start. Russell Wilson finally on the bench. Why did they bother? Why on earth did they bother? They knew they had a hard schedule, especially the first 6 weeks of the season, but really all year. I mean, the Giants got screwed for a team that was not good last season. There's no doubt about that. But why did you go out and sign Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson to turn around and play Jackson Dart in week 4 of the NFL season? What was the point? I know I know when you do things in theory, you're hoping for a better result than what winds up happening. But I'm talking to you as the viewer or the listener. Did any of you really think that Russell Wilson was going to do any better than what he's done the first 3 weeks of the season? I mean, he had 450 yards against the Dallas Cowboys. That was a shock in and of itself. So basically what I'm saying is that anybody who is not in the Giants organization could have told you that you were going to be moving on from Russell Wilson sooner rather than later anyway. At least with Jameis Winston, you would have given yourself a shot. The offense would have taken some pressure off the defense. Yes, turnovers, but he also can make the big plays. And if you were going to truly want to sit Jackson Dart until he was ready, what'd you bother with Russell Wilson for? And here's what's funny to me. This is just the icing on the cake for me. The amount of reports and players chiming out on social media and the videos that you see during practice, it's clear that there's actually a buzz inside the Giants locker room. Like, it tells you that the players were already ready after not even a month of the season to turn on Russell Wilson and are jacked up about Jackson Dart, who, let's face it, while they've gone through practice, have no idea how he's going to perform on Sunday. Nobody does. What does that mean? It's the opportunity of hope. With Russell Wilson, you know what was going to happen. It was going to be one moon ball after another with a 50% completion percentage and a quarterback who used to be mobile, still thinks he is, but is not. You knew that was going to happen. Teams just sat there and said, we're just going to blitz you and play two safeties deep and take away anything that you potentially could do. So it does get interesting from that standpoint that the Chargers, no matter how you slice it, are not going to be able to fully be prepared with a game plan this Sunday because, well, there's a lot of things you just haven't seen. That doesn't mean they won't dominate on defense. Jesse Minter's a hell of a defensive coordinator. Chargers have a talented defense. There's also a real shot here. We find out Jackson Dart flat out is not ready. There's a million different ways this thing could break down, which is why this game becomes interesting, at least from a narrative standpoint and what we get to see. But that's where we take advantage in betting. Because on the other side, while we have no idea what the Giants' offense is going to look like, we do know that the Chargers offensively might have the MVP of the season right now in Justin Herbert, just based on the first 3 weeks and how he's playing. Phenomenal football. Quentin Johnston went from a guy that we were like, okay, they're going to replace him with Trey Harris to like, Quentin Johnston might be a real player. Keenan Allen is drinking from the fountain of youth. Ladd McConkey hasn't even gotten going yet, and we know what he can do. Omarion Hampton hasn't gotten going yet, and we know what he can do because of his talent profile. And we got a taste of it last week when Najee Harris got knocked out of that game. So the Chargers right now are favored on the East Coast at 6.5 points. And I know in years past, it's always been a little bit of a death sentence whenever the Chargers go from west to east and are favored in a ball game. I get it. But this is a different Chargers team. And a Giants team is still a mess. Chargers right now are 2-0-1 against the spread to start the season. The total has moved down. It started out at 45.5. It's now down to 43.5 heading into this matchup. So they're expecting a little bit lower scoring, probably because they're not sure what the Giants exactly are going to do. And the Chargers, once they get up by a couple of scores, may just cruise control this thing out of here. Completely and utterly possible. So this is actually a game because of the unknown variables. I don't want to bet. Between the Chargers having to go from East Coast to West Coast, what we don't know about Jackson Dart and how this offense will look, I'm not betting this game. Are the Chargers the superior team? Yes. But Jackson Dart might add enough juice. Brian Daboll might coach with enough creativity because his job is on the line now that he has made this statement at this point in the season. We may see a better effort out of New York than you would normally anticipate in a matchup like this. So I'm staying away from this game. I'd love to hear what Chaz has to say.
In the last 7 first quarters, that's 105 minutes of football without a point to show for it. On the road, they're 1-8 against the spread. I like that Detroit, but I'm taking that minus 130 at minus 9.5. This could be one of those games where the team that wins, their team total goes over. The team that loses, their team total goes under. You cash every bet. Detroit's offense is put up 394 yards a game. Cleveland is putting up 203. The team total sits at 27.5. Houston has scored 38 points in 3 games. Tennessee is 2-14 against the spread. God bless you if you could find props on that game. Washington in the second half over 15.
Okay, I guess we'll have to find it later. He must have went out of order on me. It's okay. We'll get back to it. But I do have props in the Chargers-Giants game, just getting back to the original point. Hopefully you heard what he said about the Detroit Lions there. So I have Justin Herbert over his passing yards prop, 254.5 passing yards, the over-under. I got him projected at 273.7 heading into this one, giving him a 68.3% cover probability and a 19.2 edge. He's been averaging 286 passing yards per game on 36 attempts a game. 36 attempts. Greg Roman, when's the last time you thought you were ever going to see a Greg Roman offense have his quarterback throwing the ball 36 times a game? Now, I remember saying in the offseason, I thought the Chargers would throw more than people anticipated. I was projecting 32 to 33, not 36. Like, those few extra pass attempts make a huge difference. And I think even if the Chargers were to be up big, let's say come the third quarter and go on cruise control in the fourth, that Justin Herbert gets over that prop even potentially before then. The Giants have allowed the third most passing yards so far this season at 818 for the year and 4 touchdowns. The Giants have a very good front 7. They have a good pass rush. They got a good front 4. It has been as easy to run on them. That secondary is still a problem. Still a problem. And because it's Greg Roman, because it's Jim Harbaugh, teams have come in looking to stop the run because of his old tendencies. Now, I don't know if the Giants decide, okay, we're just going to throw that out and play what we've seen through the first 3 weeks of the season thus far. There will be an element to that, of course. But all the way, I don't know if that'll be the case. So give me Justin Herbert over 254.5 passing yards, as I think the Chargers will be able to throw as much as they want to early in this ball game. I do have another one for you, though, because don't forget about the rushing game. Omarion Hampton might be running out the clock in the second half. But regardless, Najee Harris is now out for the year, which makes Omarion Hampton a bell cow usage running back. Now, I know in week 1, that didn't amount to much, but the Kansas City Chiefs defense is a heck of a lot better than this Giants defense. As much as the Giants defense has talent and there's some things to be excited about, the Chiefs defense is still a full unit, especially against the run. Last week, though, we did see a spark out of Omarion Hampton. It looked like something finally triggered loose. He got out in the perimeter. He got on the edge. He got in the second level. And I think that might be a sign of things to come, especially in this game. Right now, his rushing yards prop sits at 64.5. I do have him projected for a bullish 86.2, giving him an 85.9% cover probability. Whoa! What are you talking about, Dan? Omarion Hampton's only averaged 47.3 rushing yards per game on 14 carries. Well, again, those volume numbers throw him out the window because Najee Harris is now gone. And guys like Kamani Vidal are the backups who are not going to steal very many touches. With Najee out, we should see Hampton's team carries of 64% and his target share of 10% rise. And the Giants right now are a team that you can run on. They're allowing 5 yards per carry and averaging 110 yards to the running back allowed per game at the moment. So if Omarion Hampton, if last week was an opportunity for him to start busting loose, start seeing that talent come to life that we know he has from North Carolina, this is a matchup where it could happen. So I have him confidently over the 64.5 rushing yards mark. Well, let's talk about that Commanders and Falcons game. And I'm going to see if I can work out the video with Chaz Valardi there, but it might be a little bit, all over the place, and I don't want to go chasing and throwing you guys lines that we're not talking about at the moment, just like we did there. And I apologize. So getting back to Commanders and Falcons, what a mess the Falcons were a week ago. How do you go from beating the Minnesota Vikings 22-6, running all over the Minnesota Vikings? Brian Flores teams are never teams that you're able to run on easily, ever. And Bijan did whatever he wanted. And then you fast forward a week, you take on the Carolina Panthers, who everybody has been running on since last season. And I brought this up before. Their defense has not changed much. It's basically the same starting defensive line, which is why they're just as porous against the run this season as they were a year ago to this point. And instead of leaning on the same game plan that you had against the Minnesota Vikings, you decide to go pass first. You decide not to ride Bijan on the ground. It made no sense. Well, Dan, they were down. They lost the game 30-0. It was negative game script. That game was not out of hand until midway through the third quarter. They had already abandoned the run before that. It was like the Falcons were determined they were going to throw the ball, which is the one thing the Carolina Panthers have been competent against. It made no sense. We saw the Falcons this past week fire their wide receiver coach and move Zach Robinson from the booth to the sideline. Ooh. Like that's going to do something. What? Fire the wide receiver coach? Moving from the booth to the sideline, that's not something new. That's something when coordinators are trying to mix something up, they try that out. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I don't care about that. Neither here nor there. Firing the wide receivers coach is the one to make the scapegoat. That's the problem here. What are we talking about? Zach Robinson is a bum. That's the problem. People that come up, Michael Penix looked like a deer in headlights. Well, he did. But did you listen to the comments? He wasn't prepared for what he was seeing out there. Look, there's times, sure, defensive coordinators get creative and throw out a game plan that you've never really seen before. It also tells me the coaching staff didn't have you prepared. And I do say the coaching staff. I don't put that on Michael Penix because from all accounts, Michael Penix is nothing but a student in the film room constantly. The guy lives and breathes football. So I'm willing to give players like that who we know have that mentality a benefit of the doubt. And if he wasn't seeing what he needed to see and was completely confused out there, where's the coaching? Because look, even if they came up with a game plan that you did not expect, then you need to adapt your play calling to make things a little bit easier to get on rhythm. That's being an offensive coordinator. And I had to sit there and watch Zach Robinson have Drake London and Darnell Mooney and Kyle Pitts run the same routes over and over and over again, expecting something to work. The definition of insanity. Now they get the Commanders this Sunday. I guess the silver lining is Jaden Daniels is not going to play this week. It's going to be Marcus Mariota again, who gets to take out his revenge on the Atlanta Falcons. How much revenge there is? Probably none. But the problem is going to be the defense. Look, I don't think the Commanders' defense is as good as they've looked to this point, and it's a very old defense at that, but you can't trust the Atlanta offense to actually take advantage of anything right now anyway. Commanders coming into this game on the road are favored at -1.5 points. And that's after we got confirmation that Marcus Mariota was going to be the quarterback. Still favored on the road. That's what the bookmakers think of the Atlanta Falcons right now. Now, here's what I will say in the Falcons' defense as far as betting this game. They're 3-0 on the under. The over-under line sitting at 45.5. Based on the way the Falcons offense is played, based on the fact that Marcus Mariota and not Jaden Daniels going to be playing. Based on the fact that Terry McLaurin is not going to be playing in this game, betting the under at 45.5 does seem like a good way to go. It does, because the Falcons defense on the other side has actually been very good. They really have. They just gave way because they're on the field for so much of the time and so many bad turnovers a week ago against the Carolina Panthers. They've been pretty good. So in a game like this, I do like the under in this game. But I don't have a ton of props for you in this one because there's a lot of variables. And I don't like a ton of variance when I try to give you guys props. Now, let's talk about the Eagles and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So the Eagles, again, on the road, a lot of road favorites this week. Typically, that doesn't play out very well. So it's interesting to see. This I understand, though. So the Eagles are favored at 3.5 points going into Tampa Bay. The over-under sitting at 43.5. And yeah, people will talk about Jalen Hurts being 1-2 against the Tampa Bay Bucs. This is a very banged up Bucs offense right now. And while I will stand pat on, I have not liked what I've seen out of the Eagles offense, with the exception of one half of football last week against the Rams when their backs were against the wall and they had no other choice. They finally threw it to the perimeter. They finally got the ball in the hands of their wide receivers who make plays and actually threw the ball more than 5 yards past the line of scrimmage. But it took 2.5 games to do it, and then to be down by 3 scores to follow through. But why? Why did it take so long? Why did it take that situation for you to optimize what your team's ability is? Now, you can look at that as one of two things. A sign that the Eagles figure something out and will move forward on it, which if you're an Eagles fan, that's probably what you're hoping for. Or that they're only going to get aggressive when they absolutely have to, and therefore let lesser teams hang around longer than they should. The Rams had them dead to rights. They were up 26-7 at one point in that game. The Rams just had a lapse. Eagles finally got aggressive. This reminds me so much of 2 years ago with the Philadelphia Eagles, when Shane Steichen had to become the head coach of the Colts and Nick Sirianni brought in, I believe his name was Brian Robinson or Brian Johnson. Brian Johnson. He brought in Brian Johnson to take over, one of his guys from his Indianapolis days. And it looked the same way. Remember, the Eagles went 10-0 that year. They went 10-0 before that collapse. But the whole time they were winning ball games simply because they were just more talented than everybody else. You saw the cracks. You saw the dysfunction and how that play calling was working and how everybody was just hanging around. And finally, the levee broke because players just got flat out frustrated. Because the one thing about the Eagles team is that while they're very talented, they got a lot of personality. And it doesn't really matter so much if they're winning. If their guys like A.J. Brown don't eat, that becomes a squeaky wheel. And that squeaky wheel does not get greased. It becomes a problem. We've seen it already with this exact team. And I'm a little bit curious if we might be seeing a repeat of that. Not to that extreme. I don't think they would implode the way that they did a year ago, being that they are Super Bowl champions and they were in a Super Bowl hangover that season. I do think that makes a big difference. But I have my radar up for that. As far as this matchup goes, what they run into here is that I'm still taking the Eagles to cover at -3.5. Ultimately, Tampa Bay's just too banged up on offense. Eagles defense is still very good, still playing very good. While I've had questions about the offensive play calling, I've had no questions about Vic Fangio and how that defense has been playing. And now Mike Evans for Tampa Bay is out. Chris Godwin may not be back this week. I think people were hopeful. I think we had Dr. Brian Scott on the other day saying might be another week. I don't think he's quite ready, is what Dr. Brian Scott said. And he's usually pretty dead on the money on those things. He was with Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin this week. So if that's the case, you have Emeka Egbuka, Cade Otton, who's been a non-factor, and Bucky Irving. And that's pretty much the whole offense. I don't think that's enough firepower to be able to truly contend with the Eagles for all 4 quarters. And while I've had questions about the Eagles and the close games that they've been having, even against lesser competition, the Tampa Bay Bucks, I know they're 3-0, but they've done it in some dramatic last game fashion. And while it's fun to win, and there's times you have to win those type of games in the NFL, having to depend to win those games in that fashion that consistently does not hold up in the long term. So give me the Philadelphia Eagles to cover at 3.5 points in this matchup. I do, however, speaking of Ibuka, have some props for you. So his receiving yards is sitting at 61.5 right now. I have him projected for 73.1, giving him a 72.4% cover probability and about 11.6 of an edge. He's averaging 60 yards per game anyway, leading up to this point, on 5 receptions a game. He's got a 95% route rate heading into right now and a 25% target share, mostly attacking the middle of the field. Now, he will see his fair share of Cooper DeJean, and that's not necessarily a matchup that you definitively want. But the matchup he projects to have the second most is Adoree Jackson, and that's a matchup that everyone to this point has been able to take advantage of. Plus no Mike Evans, probably no Chris Godwin. There's only one place for the ball to go to. So just off of sheer volume, I expect Emeka Ibuka to get over this 61.5 yard player prop in this matchup. That's the bet I feel the best about. Now, we have the Colts and we have the Rams. Now, this is one of the games I'm more excited to watch. Remember, the Rams were a collapse away from being 3-0. The Colts are 3-0. So this is going to be a fun game on Sunday at the 4 o'clock hour. Rams are at home. They're favored at 3.5. The total is 46.5 in this game. So we should see a decent amount of scoring, which is what I would expect with the way we've seen these two teams play at this point in the season. And the Colts just aren't 3-0. They're actually 3-0 against the spread as well. And the Rams, just like their record, is 2-1 against the spread. Doesn't always work out that way, but these two teams are. They're against spread records, and their actual records are the same. But both the Rams wins are as underdogs. So it's interesting. This is a game I'm not going to bet. There's been a lot of people talking about, is this the week Indiana Jones goes back to being, Daniel Jones of the New York Giant days? Because the Rams defense is quite good and they have a hell of a pass rush, 100%. I don't think he does. I don't know if he has a blow-up game. Again, the Rams defense is pretty solid. But the Achilles heel of the Rams is a team that can run power football. And that's what the Colts primarily are. As great as Daniel Jones has been, it's been on the back of the fact that Shane Steichen has gotten Jonathan Taylor going again and has broken out a power football offense of which he can build play action and quick, easy schemes for the passing concepts that have made Daniel Jones's life really easy. And you might be asking, well, Saquon Barkley didn't have a great game. Saquon Barkley hasn't looked good this year. Jonathan Taylor looks like he might be the rusher of the year. That's the difference. This Colts seems more equipped to attack the Rams in that sense than I think the Eagles are right now. So I think this puts them in a tough bind and makes this game too close, in my opinion, to call one way or another. But I am going to cash some tickets on this game. I can feel it because I have 2 player props for you. So the first one's Kyren Williams. Rushing yards sitting at 72.5. I got him projected for 89.4 yards with a 16.9 edge and an 80.4% cover probability in this game. So he's averaging 78 yards per game anyway. So he's literally averaging over what his prop is for the ball game on 17 carries a game and a 59% success rate. Awesome. 75% of the team snaps, 71% of the team carries. Kyren Williams is getting as much volume as you'd want him to get. Is it as much as he was getting the last 2 years? No. But what he's been getting the past 2 years was not sustainable. He's still getting bell cow level usage. That's all we really care about at the end of the day. The Colts are allowing 72 rushing yards per game to the running back position, which is right at the prop. So between Kyron and the Colts defense, everything to me screams that he should be able to hit the over this week. The next one should come as no surprise. Puka Nacua is somebody I've been riding 3 weeks in a row, and he has not let me down a single time. The difference, though, and I hope I don't jinx myself on this, but the difference this game is that I'm not actually attacking his receiving yards like I had been. I'm attacking his receptions. Devontae Adams is a little bit banged up. We'll have to see if he's able to go. But his reception prop is sitting at 7.5. I got him projected at 9.7. The guy is getting like double-digit touches. It's insane. Puka Nacua is the number one wide receiver in fantasy football right now, and yet he hasn't scored a touchdown. Think about that for a second. Number one fantasy football wide receiver, but hasn't scored a touchdown. I didn't think that was possible. That's how much volume and how many yards he's getting. And the Colts are not a team that scare you for wide receivers. They allowed 661 wide receiver yards so far on 39 receptions, which is about 17 yards per reception. They're allowing chunk plays to the wide receivers. And with Devontae Adams banged up, and we don't know if he's actually going to be able to go, that just may add to the already crazy target share that Puka Nacua has, which, by the way, is number one in the league. So give me the over on Puka Nacua's receptions at 7.5 with a decent betting odds because it is so high. I mean, it's been everywhere. And you're like, well, Dan, why are we taking chances on props that are that high to begin with? Well, he's averaging 8 catches a game. He's averaging 10.3 targets a game. He has a 34% first read share. Huh. You think he's the featured part of the offense? I do. Guess what? Puka Nacua goes over. All right, so let's get to the Jaguars and the 49ers. And if you are watching the show, you can see my Vernon Davis jersey in the background. If you have listened to this show, you know I'm a 49ers fan. And whenever I get the opportunity to bet the 49ers, because my data lines up with my team fandom, oh, trust me, I take it. The 49ers in this game are favored at 3.5 points. Brock Purdy is going to play, which is why the over-under total went from 45.5 to 47.5 as soon as that news was announced. I think the 49ers are the better team. There definitely is a lot of things. The Jaguars, while I do think they're improving from what we've seen a year ago under Liam Cohen, there's a lot of kinks that they still need to get worked out over there before I can put them in a above average team category. Where the 49ers, even despite all of their injuries, are 3-0 and finding ways to win games. It's been ugly football, but it's been impressive at the same time that they've been able to do this. I know everybody's going to talk about their schedule and all this. I saw this thing on, and I wish I could remember who posted it because I'd love to give them credit, but I saw this meme on Twitter the other day, and it was pointing out of all the 3-0 teams what their opponents' records are. And they're talking about how the Bills and the Chargers and all these teams, like their opponents' combined records are all like 1-8. Well, the 49ers opponent's record is 4-5. And I think it was the Eagles. I'm drawing a little bit of a blank right now, but I think it was the Eagles that they were tied with as far as the 3-0 teams and what the opponent records were. 4-5. So of the 3-0 teams, 4-5 was the best combined opponent record. So we could talk about how they have an easy schedule all they want to, but of the undefeated teams, they've played other teams that have actually won ball games so far. I just want to point that out and have done it without Brock for 2 weeks, without Brandon Ayuk, without George Kittle, a half of a Jawan Jennings. Now they have to do it without Nick Bosa. They did it without Nick Bosa for most of the game last week too. So it's been impressive from that standpoint, even though admittedly, it's been ugly, ugly football. When I look at this game, though, like I said, I bet them anytime my model and my fandom can line up. They don't necessarily in this matchup. While I have the 49ers winning this game, and I would take them on the money line, and it's minus 185, so it's not a bad money line to bet on. The 3.5, that half-point hook, I'm not crazy about it because I do see this as a field goal game. I have San Francisco winning this game 23-20. That half-point hook, I can't quite bet it. But a half-point hook is not enough for me to bet on the underdog on the other side. Because as much as the running game has gotten fixed with Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence has not worked on his fundamentals at all. And that's what we're dealing with. That's the issue. That's why that offense hasn't taken off under Liam Cohen. I know he defended him the other day. I don't want to hear it. His fundamentals have not improved, and that's been the biggest thing holding Trevor Lawrence back, more so than the coaching changes, more so than anything else. The other thing about the Jacksonville Jaguars I don't necessarily buy into is that they suddenly have a good defense. I know statistically they look like a much more competent version than what they've had, and they probably are a more competent version, but this is not a top 10 defense like the data would maybe make you believe in certain areas. It's a team you could definitely run at. Team you could definitely hit over the middle on. So we'll see that, I think, on Sunday, but a game that I'm not necessarily betting lines on in this matchup. And there weren't any props that I had a big enough edge on to really bet on either, unfortunately. But the Browns and Lions, and if I could back up Chaz's video a little bit, I might be able to get him to do the Browns and Lions. So bear with me for 1 second.
So that means if you bet him 203, the team total sits at 27.5. You should have scored 38 points in 3.5.
Well, maybe not. Maybe it's not going to work out. I tried, guys. I'm sorry. The Cleveland Browns and the Detroit Lions heading into this game. So the Lions are favored at minus 9.5 points. Money line, they're minus 600. So very much expected to win this game with a total over-under of 44.5. For anybody who's played football before, and I'm included in this, and actually played like organized, whether it be high school, college, whatever the case may have been. If you've ever been a team that maybe wasn't that great, maybe we're having a losing season, but you had that one rivalry game come into town, and you had your best week of practice, and you're focused all week, and you're being told how you're going to get beat down that whole time, and you just went into that game razor sharp. Everybody in your crew did. And you pulled off an upset that no one expected you to do. With the energy and adrenaline it takes to do that when you are clearly not the better team. What happens typically the following week? For those of you who have maybe not experienced that, I can tell you from experience, you typically have a major letdown the following week. It is hard to carry that focus, that energy, when you don't have the talent week over week. Even in the NFL. I've seen it a million times before. I'm looking at the Browns as that against the Lions this week. They had a big game against the Packers. The defense played lights out. And the defense is legitimately great. Like, if they had any semblance of a quarterback, the Browns legitimately, just based on the defense, could be a Super Bowl contending team. That's how good the defense is. So I don't want to sell them short. But when Joe Flacco, who clearly can't move anymore, not even to like the left or the right, is giving up the ball and turning over the ball at the rate that he is and putting the defense on the field at the rate that he is, even great defenses will eventually break in this league if they are on the field 2/3 of the game. That's the problem the Cleveland Browns face this week against the Detroit Lions. That's the likelihood. It's why the bookmakers had the Lions favored at 9.5 points. And frankly, I don't think that's enough. I think the Lions win this game by at least 17 points. So take the Lions minus 9.5. I feel real strong about that. Plus the Lions, they showed you something against the Ravens on Monday night. They didn't break a sweat in that game, and they pretty much controlled it from start to finish. Now, grant you, that Ravens defense just may not be the defense we all thought and hoped it would be, but that's besides the point. Jared Goff on the road in a Monday night game looked sharp, played well. And now they get to go back home against a lesser talented opponent, which they always play well at home. Always. So give me the Lions covering at 9.5 points. Panthers, Patriots. Not a game typically people would get excited about unless you're a fan of this show when we talk about bets and we talk about fantasy football. And that's the beauty of it. So this line, I can't believe one game where the Panthers offense didn't even play well. Remember, Bryce Young, yes, they beat the Falcons 30-0. Okay. He threw 120 yards. It had nothing to do with the offense. It had everything to do with the circumstances and the defense playing out of their minds. And they're only 5.5-point underdogs. Now, I understand that the Patriots have not played particularly fantastic football. I understand that. But even the Patriots at home, should be favored by 6.5 points in this game. Because they're finally going to play a team that doesn't have a very good offense. Now, Teteroa McMillan's going to play, but don't forget, he was banged up with a calf issue. Clearly, it's a minor one, because again, he's going to be cleared to play. But once you have a calf issue, that type of a soft tissue issue, that could rear its ugly head at any moment. If Teteroa McMillan goes down, they have Chuba Hubbard and nothing else. Remember, Jalen Coker's not back yet. Xavier gets out with a hamstring, and that might be a godsend that he's off the field. They might be better because he's not active. I mean, this is brutal. Drake May by himself in a matchup like this should count for 6 points. Give me the Patriots to cover at -5.5 at home. 100%. The total over-under in this game is 42.5. Give me the under. Neither offense is impressive right now. I would be even more confident to say take the Patriots +10 if they would ever just solidify an identity out of their backfield with the running back group. Ramondre Stevenson fumbled twice. We know he can't hold on to the football. Antonio Gibson is Antonio Gibson, a backup. What's funny to me about TreVeyon Henderson is that I got scrutinized on social media for calling out the fact that he was not a very good pass protector because everybody else had a different narrative and a different perspective. Well, PFF backed my play. PFF only had him as a 33.2 grade, I believe it was, as a pass blocker, as a running back, which is in the bottom tier, by the way. And yet everybody would tell me, like, well, he was the pass catching back in Ohio State, and he made this block. Blah, blah, blah. There's highlights for anything, guys. It's college. His fundamentals were never there. He doesn't have a strong base. He needs to be more technically sound. You want to know why he got soft bench a couple of weeks ago? Because he blew 2 blocks. That's why. So don't talk to me about TreVeyon Henderson being a good pass protector. And that's why, even after 2 fumbles, we couldn't see him overtake Ramondre Stevenson all the way. To the point this week where, as a guy who projects for fantasy football, that's one of the toughest backfields to project because I still can't project it as a Henderson taking over. Ultimately, I had to look at this thing as like, it's a 3-way committee that's probably still leaning a little bit Stevenson right now. Why does that matter for game lines? Well, once you actually establish who your playmakers are, an offense tends to get an identity. When you get an identity, you tend to play more efficiently. When you play more efficiently, you tend to score more points. It's how it works. Stop wasting our time, Josh McDaniels. But at any rate, I do have the Patriots covering at 5.5 points in this ball game, and I do have a player prop for you. So give me Hunter Henry over 4.5 receptions. I have him projected for almost 5. So it's one of my smaller edges on the week, but I feel pretty good about it considering Hunter Henry has averaged about 7.3 targets per game and about 4.3 receptions per game already to this point. Like about a 20% target share. He's been the number one target, actually, for Drake May so far. Week 1, I know his stat line didn't look fantastic, but he had 8 targets in that game. It's really just week 2 that was kind of holding him back after he exploded a week ago. And then the Panthers, have given up 222 receiving yards to the tight ends so far. That is the worst in the NFL. So it's a good match for Hunter Henry. The volume should be there, being that Stephon Diggs is not playing much. Pop Douglas is terrible. And Kayshon Boutte and Matt Collins are just out there running the treadmill. And Travion Henderson still has not been able to establish himself. That leaves pretty much Hunter Henry as the only stable target that Drake May has in a plus matchup here against the Panthers. So give me Hunter Henry in this one. All right, let's talk about the Bears and the Raiders. And I'll try to speed this up a little bit. So the Bears are favored at 1.5 points against the Las Vegas Raiders in this game. Or I'm sorry, I take that back. I'm sorry. The Raiders are favored at minus 1.5 points in Las Vegas over the Chicago Bears. Why? Why? Yeah, that sounder means give me my first underdog straight up bet. I am taking the Bears to beat the Raiders straight up. It's always a little bit more confident to take underdogs when it is only a 1.5 point spread. I will grant you that. But what about the Raiders has been impressive? There's been a ton of questions about Chicago. Don't get me twisted here. I don't think just after one win, suddenly this team has turned a corner and this is going to be the team we all got excited about in the offseason. Just after that, no. But nothing about the Raiders has been impressive. Nothing. Chip Kelly is up to crazy Chip Kelly things. Ashton Jeanty still has not been able to get going. Geno Smith has been the Geno Smith he's always been. Inconsistent. In inconsistent situations. That's who he is. No, the Bears defense is not the Bears defense that we are used to or accustomed to seeing. Absolutely not. 100%. But the offense has a lot of talent. And I grant you, it was the Dallas Cowboys last week. I had Caleb Williams ready to go in my top 5. But the Raiders can't stop anybody either. And in fact, I have Caleb on a player prop. His line set at 230.5 passing yards. That's a joke. I have him projected for 240. I think my projection is even a little bit low, to be honest with you. He's averaging 238 passing yards so far this game at 7.7 yards per attempt and averaging about 32 to 35 attempts per game. With the Bears, on top of it, Ben Johnson has been a pass-first guy. I don't think that's totally shocking, but in neutral pass rate is 59%. That means the quarterback, whether it's neutral or negative, is going to throw the football. That's great for player props. So I love Caleb over the 230.5 passing yards in this game. And just to add a little sprinkle on top, the Raiders have allowed 736 passing yards and 4 touchdowns so far this season, the quarterbacks. That puts them in the bottom 10. So unless Chicago gets a big lead early and they kind of call off the dogs type of deal, I don't see how Caleb doesn't hit this passing yards prop, to be honest with you. So that's what I feel good. So the Bears as underdogs straight up and Caleb Williams over 230.5 passing yards. Oh, I'm sorry. I also have Ashton Jeanty in this game. Talked about him a little bit. So Ashton Jeanty, talk about him not getting going. So his player prop that I'm targeting is his receiving yards. It's at 13.5. I have the under. Like I'm projected at 9.8. 57.6% probability of coverage. The guy only has 6 targets through 3 games. He has 3 receiving yards on the season. 2 targets a game at 3 yards, 1 yard per game. And his prop set at 13.5. The Raiders are not throwing the ball to the running backs, period. And even when they do, it's Zamir White and Dylan Labe, who are playing most of the passing situations. Is it stupid? Yes. What did you expect when you hired Chip Kelly in the first place? So give me the under on Ashton Genty on his receiving yards. Let's get into the Ravens-Chiefs games. I think a lot of people are looking forward to this game because it's just so shocking that they're both 1-3 in this matchup. Ravens on the road favored at -3 points right now. It was at -2.5, and that's when I jumped on it. That was when you always want to jump on it early when you see that 2.5, because if it goes to 3, you don't want to lose that hook, right? You want the opportunity that if they do win by 3, that it won't be a push. That's why you're always trying to attack that. But the line has moved because the money's moved to mostly Baltimore. It has moved to 3 points here. People are talking about it's surprising that the Ravens are on the road and in their favor. Why? Why is that surprising? I know everybody watches the national primetime game, so there's more eyeballs on the Monday night game and they watch the Ravens get spanked by the Detroit Lions. I get it. But if you've watched the Chiefs at all this season, even in the Giants game, which they won comfortably 22-6, you can tell that offense is broken. All the talk that they had about being aggressive again, getting Mahomes throwing the ball down the field again, none of it's come to fruition. None of it. And don't tell me it's because Xavier Worthy's been out. It was always going to take more than one guy for this offense to be explosive again. Was always good. It takes a play caller's change in philosophy from what we have seen the past 2 years. And if you're going to sit there and tell me, well, Andy Reid was the guy, he was. Matt Nagy clearly has possessed Andy Reid to the point where he has become a bubble screen, 5 yards from the line of scrimmage passing offense with Patrick freaking Mahomes. It's maddening to watch. But that's what we have going on right now. So even if you think the Ravens defense stinks, which it does at the moment, the Chiefs are not in a position to take advantage of it. So who cares? This plays right into the Ravens' hands. So I'm taking the Ravens to cover even at the 3. I'm still going to take them to cover. I'm taking the under in this ball game, by the way. 48.5. The Chiefs defense is legit. The Chiefs offense is not. That adds up to me as a low scoring affair. Give me the under in this ball game. 100%. I do have a prop for you. So Zay Flowers receptions is at 4.5 over under. I have him projected for 5.7 heading into this game. So it's one of my better edges of the week, or at least as far as cover probability goes, which is at 75.5%. He's at a 72.7 catch rate so far this season. He's averaging 5 receptions a game anyway. He's been running every route, and he's by far the first read on this team. Give me Zay Flowers over 4.5 receptions in this game. All right, so now we finally get into the Sunday night game with the Packers and the Cowboys. As you would suspect, the Packers are definitely favorites in this matchup. 7-point favorites to be exact, with a 47.5 over under this week. I'm not touching that. So as far as the total scoring in this game, it could go a multitude of ways. And there wasn't any one point that the model kind of locked down on. When you run through the simulations, when the edges from low scoring to the high scoring to the median scoring get all too close together, it's a game you kind of stay away from over-unders. Because on one hand, the data would support the Dallas Cowboys being able to put up points. On the other hand, they don't have CeeDee Lamb. When you factor in that probability, it all just becomes too meshed in the middle. I'm taking the Packers to cover by 7 points, though. That I do feel good about. But the Cleveland Browns, they just beat the Packers outright. Yeah, this is the NFL. Things happen. I don't know what to tell you. 100%. The Packers defense is still right now, statistically, the best defense in the NFL. The Dallas defense is statistically, by a wide margin, the worst defense in the NFL. Packers have a competent offense. If you have a competent offense against this Dallas defense, you're going to put up points, period. And without CeeDee Lamb and without Cooper Beebe, And without Tyler Booker making the running game susceptible to not doing anything in this game, I don't know how Dallas scores often in a matchup like this. I don't see it. So I think the Packers win this one handily. But if they don't put up like 30 points themselves, I don't know how we get to the over-under necessarily, but I wouldn't rule out the fact that them putting up 30 points themselves because, well, it's the Dallas defense. So that's kind of why we stay away from that. But I do have the Packers covering this game at -7 in a matchup like this. And in a matchup like this, when you have this topsy-turvy defense versus defense thing with the best defense versus the worst defense, usually that's a good breeding ground for player props. So let's get to it. Jordan Love. Not his passing yards, but his rushing yards. I'm all over. 6.5. I have him projected for 13.6 rushing yards this week. He's averaging 11.3 per game thus far. On scrambles, they're not designing him for him, but Jordan Love is a guy who's known to take off a time or two. And the Cowboys are allowing 31 rushing yards to the quarterback per game and are in the top 3 in rushing yards allowed to the quarterback. Now, a lot of that, yes, had to do with Jalen Hurts in week 1, 100%. But in a game in which Jordan Love just 1 or 2 times could easily cover the over at 6.5, that just takes one run. That lane's going to be open for him to do that at some point. And it's something he is already known to do at least a couple times a game. So I really like Jordan Love over 6.5 rushing yards this week. I also like Jake Ferguson. And I knew I had it. That's why I had to pause because I had to figure it out. Jake Ferguson, 53.5 receiving yards. I have him projected for 62.3. He's averaging 61 anyway. So he's literally averaging about 8 yards over the prop in this ball game. And while the Packers defense has been very, very good, they have not been super awesome against the tight ends. They've allowed 215 tight end yards and a touchdown already this season. That has been the one area where they have been susceptible. And without CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson has been a target freaking monster. Like, a lot of volume is going his way. One could argue that not George Pickens, but Jake Ferguson is the number 1 target on this team with no CeeDee Lamb in the ballgame. So between the volume and the matchup, I do like Jake Ferguson to go over 53.5 receiving yards in this game. Let's talk about this Monday night. So now we have the Jets and the Dolphins on Monday Night Football. Woo. But the good news here is that Justin Fields is, in fact, going to play. And I think that goes a long way when you're talking about another porous defense in the Miami Dolphins. This isn't Miami, but Miami's favored at 2.5 points here. What? Miami's favored at a game? Look, I don't care how bad people think the Jets are or how bad they looked on paper. They're not going to be able to stop the run against the Jets. Justin Fields and Breece Hall should pretty much be able to do whatever the hell they want. And Garrett Wilson will get his opportunities too. Between that and the Dolphins offense being suspect at best, the Jets defense has not been very good so far this season, but we do know that they have the talent to do so. Give me the Jets to win outright in this game against the Dolphins. I know this is a battle of like which less impressive team is less impressive. But that's kind of where I take the Jets, where the Dolphins, because they still have no physicality to them whatsoever. The Jets do. And if you have any physicality, you beat up on the Dolphins. So give me the Jets to cover this game outright. Don't have a prop for you in this one. So the Cincinnati Bengals and the Denver Broncos. Broncos favored at 7.5 points. This is in Denver. The over-under set at 44.5. I'm attacking the under first and foremost. The Denver Broncos are not interested in scoring points. Bo Nix stinks. I've been saying it all the time. Had to eat it for a year. Playing out to fruition so far through the first 3 weeks. Sean Payton is a conservative play caller. Bo Nix, not very good down the field. They're not interested in scoring a ton of points. Plain and simple. I don't care how bad you think the Cincinnati Bengals defense is. On the flip side, without Joe Burrow against a good defense, the Bengals are turnover city with Jake Browning. Absolutely turnover city. Give me the under in this game. I don't see a lot of points being scored. The prop that I want to attack the most is Jake Browning himself. So passing touchdowns, which is an average passing touchdown prop. It's 1.5. That's like the average prop that you're going to see for quarterbacks when it comes to touchdowns. I have only projected for 1.1 to be exact, but essentially 1 touchdown. So as long as he doesn't get 2 touchdowns, you win the prop. Now, technically, he's been averaging 1.5 touchdowns through the last couple of games on 29.5 attempts. So even though they've been in negative game scripts, he's not even averaging 30 attempts a game in the games that he's played. Going up against the Denver Broncos, who are much better against the pass than they are the run so far this season, and probably will remain true too. The Broncos have only allowed 2 passing touchdowns this season through 3 games. 3 games, 2 passing touchdowns. That's impressive. So with the matchup and how he's looked and how he's played, yeah, give me the under 1.5 passing touchdowns out of Jake Browning this week. That brings the show to a close. Had a good time, actually, being solo pot. I love Chaz Valardi, though. I miss him. Chaz Valardi, championshipfootballs.com of Sports Betting Weekly. I miss him. I don't think we have him back yet next week either. I think it'll be the week after that. I might be getting as a guest next week for this show. We'll see. Or it may just be me. Who knows? The most important thing is whether it's me, whether it's somebody else, whatever, we're lining your pockets green. Make sure you check out my article on The Huddle, where I'll go into detail on my 15-player props of the week. Make sure you download the Operation Domination podcast on your favorite podcast app. And make sure you check out our video content on the Fantasy Football Advice Network YouTube channel at FF Advice Net. Good luck this weekend, and I'll see you guys next week.